I think so. Where is it? Red light blinking
It's
there?
on.
Okay. So tonight I'm going to be talking about healing post-traumatic stress and healing the wounded child within, because they're both very closely related to each other. There's the same dynamic involved in healing post-traumatic stress and healing the child within. And Hippocrates had talked about the body being able to heal itself. Well, it turns out the mind can heal itself too, given the opportunity, and we're going to be talking about how that happens. You ever have a problem with your computer and you could take hours or days trying to fix it, and no matter what you do, you can't get it working, and a computer programmer comes in and within minutes, click, 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 and the thing is working? Why was he able to do within minutes what you couldn't do within days? Because he knows the language, the operational language of the subconscious mind. I'm sorry. He knows the language of the computer. The computer runs on an operational language which is not English, it's binary. He knows that binary language. So he can get things done on a different level than you and I can do, because the machine may hold English, but it doesn't operate on English. It operates on Cobalt or Fortran, whatever it may be. Well, our minds don't operate on English either. We speak English, we think in English, but whether we speak English, Japanese, or Chinese, the subconscious mind, which is the root of all thoughts and feelings and reactions, operate on one language, which is pictures. And you see those pictures when you go to sleep at night, and your conscious mind is shut off, and your conscious mind... Would you tell him to move, please? Thanks. When you go to sleep at night and your conscious mind is shut off, all you're looking at are the pictures, the images of your subconscious mind. And that's the root of all thoughts, feelings, and reactions. If you get hurt or angry or feel guilty or ashamed, do you have to stop and think, gee, should I be angry right now? Or you just feel it. It comes to you automatically. And it comes to you automatically from some place. And that place is the subconscious mind, which again is only made up of one thing, pictures. And these are pictures that you see for about 1/10 of a second. You're not even aware you see them, but you do see them. And the way it works is this. You've heard you have two hemispheres. Your left brain is logical, your right brain is visual. So you notice when you ask someone a question, their eyes go this way, that way, this way, that way. Why? They're accessing information. So when you ask someone a question, it's a logical question, goes into the left brain. The left brain takes a look at the right brain, sees a quick picture for 1/10 of a second, has a reaction, and then comes back and gives you an answer. How long does that take? Like a second. Which means the brain has to operate even faster than that. In fact, it does. It happens in about 1/10 of a second. So, for example, let's say we're working on anger, and I say to you, what do you want to have happen? You say, well, I don't want to be so angry all the time. Well, how can you tell? I get explosive. When you get explosive, where do you feel it? In my chest. What's it like there? Like a volcano. Now that volcano is not your imagination. That volcano was there before we named it, before you came into the office, it was there. But we just got its name, and that image is what your left brain sees when it looks at the right side and then comes back with an answer like that. You're just not aware of it. Okay? It's like you and I are walking down the street and a dog comes up to us and you go to pet it and I back off. Same dog, same street, same time of day, but we both have different reactions. Why is that? Because we both saw pictures, the different pictures of what we expected to happen next. You didn't have to stop and think about it. Gee, when I was 7 years old, I was bit by a dog and maybe that... No, boom, you have a reaction. Because your left brain looked at your right brain, your left brain had a response. Okay? So in therapy, what we want to do is we want to get a hold of those pictures, because that's where your feelings come from. And we get a hold of those pictures by asking questions that slow down the perception of time. I can't just say to you, oh, what's it like there? What's it feel like? I ask questions very slowly because I want to capture the imagery that you see very fast. So I'll use the same question, I'll repeat it again and again, and your subconscious mind will throw up an image. And then you report what you see, and then we use that image. And it's very interesting. I cannot, and you cannot, consciously change a picture. For example, let's say we have a volcano that is where your anger comes from. And it's easy to say it represents your anger, but actually it doesn't represent your anger. It's the source of your anger. So I could easily say, well, you know what, let's have a snowstorm come around and cool it down. And you'll feel cooled down and you'll calm down and you'll feel good and you leave the office and you'll feel good for an hour or a day. But by the next day you're going to say, I'm still pissed, I'm still angry, I still can't control myself. Why? Because we used your imagination to try to control your subconscious mind. Doesn't work. You can't overlay imagery and expect there to be a change. What you have to do is work with the pictures you have. So for example, with a volcano, what does a volcano want to do?
Erupt.
It wants to erupt. So if we can give that volcano a chance to erupt, and it spends itself, and then it cools down, then you have a different reaction. I'll give you an example, concrete example. A dentist came to see me. He says, you know, when I'm with people, I kind of clam up. I really don't like to talk if I'm with a group of people. If I'm with my wife and another couple, I'm all right. But you put me in a room full of more than that, and I'll just shut up. We talked. There's no particular trauma, no abuse, nothing serious in his background that would account for how he felt. He said, well, that's just the way I am. It's okay. So when you'd like to be able to speak up and you find that you can't, what would have to be different inside? He says, well, I guess, no, when you put it that way, I guess I have to feel a bit stronger than I do. Where do you not feel quite as strong as you'd like? In my gut, what's it like there? Well, I never thought of it, but I guess it's kind of soft and mushy. Soft and mushy like what? Like clay. Now we have our picture. We have what we call a metaphor. Okay? It's a subconscious structure, and it's a metaphor called soft, mushy clay. Consciously, he says, I can't speak up. Subconsciously, he has soft, mushy clay. Okay? So now the questions, now as we're talking, now he's just the observer. I invite him to just look at what he sees, not to change what he sees because he doesn't like it, but just to report what he sees. So I said, well, now that we have soft, mushy clay, can you describe, does it have any color? Does it have a shape, a size? Does it have any moisture? What kind of texture? Does it have a weight? So by the 7th or 8th question, he says to me, well, that's interesting. I said, what's that? He said, well, I don't know if all these questions are bringing it to the light of day or the open air, but I think it's getting harder. So a soft, mushy clay is getting harder. How hard can soft, mushy clay get as it's getting harder? And you notice I'm wrapping my words around the structure because these are very fragile structures. I mean, you just see them like that, so I want to reinforce them. So he says, well, I don't know, but it's getting hard like steel. What kind of steel? I don't know, but I see like rivets. What kind of rivets? Like the kind you see in a battleship. What kind of battleship? A World War II battle cruiser. So we've gone from soft, mushy clay to a World War II battle cruiser, and you notice I didn't contaminate it. I didn't direct it. I didn't suggest it. I simply questioned it. It's the active observation. The active observation. And by the way, it's a law in physics if you want to look up the law of observation. It's a law. It's not a theory. And the law states that whatever you observe changes simply by the active observation. I'm not going to get into the physics here. You can look it up if you're interested. But here's the point. When you have an opportunity to observe your structures, they change on their own. So by asking all these questions, soft, mushy clay got hard like steel, like a battleship, World War II battle cruiser. Okay? Okay, you all with me so far? Now, he's a dentist. Next week he goes off to a dentist convention, comes back the following week, and he says to me, he says, "You won't believe what happened." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, I'm in an auditorium. There's about 400 or 500 other dentists, and one of the speakers gets up, and the first words out of his mouth are, 'You know, folks, dentists have the highest rate of suicide.' To which I yelled out, 'Not the good ones!' Brought the house down. Everyone cracked up. He says, that was so unlike me. I wondered what got into me, and then I realized where those words came from. They shot out of a cannon on that ship." You see, as automatically as he'd have shut down and not said a word no matter what he thought, that's how automatically he shot back, because his inner structure was changed. Just like I can change anything about this machine if I know the operational language. If we change your operational language, we change how you feel, how you think, and out of that, how you react. He didn't have to stop and think, well, now I have a World War II battle cruiser, what can I say? He didn't even think about it. He just automatically shot back. He wasn't talking in front of a group of 20 people, no less 400 or 500, and he yelled it out. So when you change your inner structures, you get an automatic change of thoughts, feelings, and reactions. Now, relating that to the wounded child within, the child within is born in moments of trauma, abuse, neglect, great loss. And PTSD and it happens with post-traumatic stress and the wounded child are both occur at those kind of moments. I'll give you an example. A gentleman comes to see me. He's in a plane, took a nosedive, he thought he was going to die. And I said to him, "Let me ask you a very odd question. Did you live through that plane ride?" And he went, "No, not really." Now, why would somebody who's living and breathing, sitting in front of me, say no, not really, when they know they're alive? He wasn't schizophrenic, he wasn't psychotic, he knew he was alive. But he said no. Why? Because here's what happens. He's in the plane, smells smoke, looks out the window, the engine's on fire, the plane goes like this, and he goes like that. Now, what is that? That's an attempt to stop time. I don't want to go there. The next moment is death. So he freezes in time. So when I said to him, "Did you live through that plane ride?" and he says no, it's because the guy who's frozen in that moment of time didn't know he lived through it. Sitting there, he knows he's alive, but the part of him that froze, that disconnected, that dissociated, doesn't know he lived through that plane ride. That's why if you've been in a bad car accident or you know someone who has, 2 years later they say, "It happened. I still see it like it happened yesterday. The car is still coming at me." Why? Because they're frozen in that moment. And that's what happens to us as children. When mommy says, "I don't love you," or daddy leaves and doesn't come back, or we get molested or something terrible happens and we don't want to be there, we disconnect. And that protects us from the awfulness of what we're feeling or the awfulness of what's happening. But in effect, we freeze in time. And that's where the wounded child within comes from, those moments in time when we stopped. Now, you can go into therapy and spend 5 years talking about what happened to you, but I'm here to tell you, it's not about what happened to you. It's about what it did to you. It's about how it made you fragment and disconnect to not be there, and so you're still frozen in time. And that child within you has some level of control over how you think, what you feel, and how you react. And so when you have reactions that you don't like and you feel like you can't control, it's coming from that part of you that got frozen in time. Let me look at my notes, see if I'm not missing anything before I go on. A friend of mine came over with his son the boy's now 6.5, but he was 3 at the time. And somehow we got into this game of stealing brains. So he comes over to me, he says, I'm stealing your brains and I'm putting it in my head. I says, no, I'm stealing your brains and putting it in my head. And we're going back and forth like that, and all of a sudden he freaks out, runs to his father, Daddy, he stole my brains! He's 3 years old, and all of a sudden he believed I'm stealing his brains. Runs to his father. His father says, that's okay, calm down, Maxie, it's all right, calm down, you're okay. Finally, Maxie calms down, and then Ed, my friend, says to him, now, go back and get your brains. So Maxie comes over, and now he's angry. And he's grabbing my head and putting the brains back in his head. What happened? What happened was he got scared, he got comforted, and then he expressed his anger because he got scared. Okay? Had a feeling, got comforted, expressed another feeling because of that. Now, how many times growing up did we go through something like that where we got scared and we were told, don't be stupid. Stop acting that way. What's wrong with you? What happens then? What happens then is you disconnect from yourself. Because to protect yourself from hearing that criticism again, from being disapproved of again, you internalize that criticism, and now you got to split between what you need and what you feel and what you should need and what you should feel. You develop an internal critic, which over the years becomes more and more pronounced and dictatorial and mean, and then you've got this internal critic that criticizes you all the time, born in a moment or moments such as that. And then there's this disconnection, and there's a split, and there's this internal criticism. And out of that comes a need for approval, a need, because now I'm not going to approve of myself, I'm critical of myself, so I more than ever need you to approve of me. Only I'm never satisfied by that. And I've got a great need and a great expectation for you to be good to me, and then I'll try to manipulate you and control you so you're giving me what I need, only I'm never really satisfied because I'm disconnected inside and I can't be satisfied, not fully. So how do you heal that? Again, you could talk about how terrible your childhood was and what happened to you, and it's of some limited value because you're getting it out. I mean, it's good to talk about. No, I don't question that, the value of talking about it. But if you want to heal, you got to go to where the split is, where the break is. And again, that happens in a flash. That happens in a moment. And in that moment that you disconnect, where does it happen? Does it happen consciously? No. It happens in the subconscious mind, like the guy on the plane. He didn't stop and think, well, gee, this is the worst moment of my life. I think I'll freeze time right about here. Not consciously, but subconsciously, he did it in a moment. And that's what we do. If Daddy's walking out and leaving, what do you see for the rest of your life? You see him walking out and leaving. You never see him leave. You never see him out the door. You know why? Because once he's out the door, he's gone. You can't let that happen. So it's always, he's leaving. See, it's always the moment before. It's not afterwards, because it's too painful. We freeze it in time. He's leaving. And so what happens then? We disconnect. I'll go up to the ceiling, out the window, into the wallpaper, deep within, to not be there because it's too painful, and then I'm lost. I had a woman, she wanted to lose weight. I said, what has to happen? She said, I have to lose my sweet tooth. I said, how can you tell you have a sweet tooth? I think about it all the time. Where is that? In my head. Where in your head? In the middle. What's it like? I see this wall. What kind of wall? Like a white wall. What kind of white wall? Like a maze. So let's meditate on the maze for a while. Just look at that maze and see what comes up when you know about a white maze like that. She says, that's funny. I said, what's that? She said, well, as I look at this maze, it's like, it's long and it goes all around, but I see a little girl leaning up against it. How old is she? She's 8. And when she's an 8-year-old girl is leaning up against it, what do we know about that 8-year-old girl? And she starts crying. She says, well, that was me. I got molested by my stepfather when I was 8. What happened then? She says, I told myself I couldn't be a little girl anymore. I had to grow up right then and there. So when you told yourself you had to grow up right then and there, what happened to the little girl? I buried her. I couldn't have a, there's no room for her anymore. And when you buried her, where'd you bury her? Real deep. And how deep is that? And all of a sudden she sees herself like covered in dirt real deep. And that's the child within. See, and she made that decision like that. She didn't stop and sleep on it and think about it. Well, how do I deal with this? She told herself, no room for me for that little girl anymore. I got to grow up. Boom. Threw that little girl down under the dirt. I said, so what do you want to say to her? She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, before you told her there was no room for her, you told her she had to be gone, she couldn't be there anymore. Could we experiment with saying just the opposite? Opposite? You mean like tell her that I love her, you mean? I says, yeah. How do you feel about doing that? She said, well, I don't know. I've never tried that. Well, now that you see she's buried under dirt, and that's where you left her, let's experiment, if it's okay with you, in telling her you love her and welcoming her back. So she starts saying that, she starts crying. And the more she's talking to this 8-year-old girl and loving her and inviting her back, the more she's sobbing. And finally, she wipes the girl up and invites her back to live with her, and all of a sudden becomes a baby in a receiving blanket. In a receiving blanket. So now she's welcoming herself back. So, you see, you want to find out from your therapist, you want to locate that child that disconnected. And it often doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's cognitive, like there's a child, but sometimes it's not so obvious in terms of what form that child will take. I had a gentleman who came to see me, and he'd been molested by his father, and I said, what do you want to have happen? He said, well, I'd like to forgive him. He's been dead for 10 or 20 years, whatever it was, and I still haven't forgiven him. How can you tell? I'm angry. Long story made short, the anger was in his head. The metaphor was a hot rock. So, again, as the observer looking at this hot rock, could we invite the hot rock back to the memory of a father doing that? And I never go into detail about what occurred. I just say doing that. So the hot rock goes back there, but it takes a long time. How long a time? 3 weeks. So as it takes 3 weeks to go back to that memory, what happens to the hot rock? It cools down. Like what? Like a mirror. What kind of a mirror? Plain mirror. Where does it go? To his face. Where? In the front. He looks in the mirror. Then what happens? Long story made short, he looks at the father in the memory, looks in the mirror, sees his own shame, stops what he's doing, pats the boy on his shoulder and says, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize what I was doing. Please forgive me, and walks off. Now, what's happened here? Number one, the anger that was resident in his physiology, in his head, is now outside of him. And the memory that was truncated, meaning, if I say, tell me what happened, you go, oh no, don't make me, you don't want to relive those moments. So now, it's over, it's finished. The father walked off, it's no longer happening. In the back of his mind, it was still happening. Now it's finished. See, your uncomfortable feeling, in its metaphorical form, in its picture form, can go back into memory and heal it. Take care of the child, move the memory forward in time. A woman came to see me. She'd been ritually abused by her father and her uncle and other men. And as we got closer to her feelings, she started to feel like she was going crazy. She couldn't tolerate how she was feeling. I said, well, what do you feel it on the inside of your skin or the outside? She said, it's outside. Whereabouts? All around me. Like what? Like electrons swirling around. So I'm looking now, she's feeling out of control, and she's got these electrons going all around her, so I'm looking for a point of control. What would be a point of control with basically an atom? Be the nucleus, I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. I said, well, let me ask you. I took a shot, I took a guess. I said, what kind of a nucleus does that have when all the atoms are going like that? Like a bomb. What kind of a bomb? An atom bomb. What can an atom bomb do, and where can it go? I see it going into the cellar where most of what happened. And as it goes into the cellar, what happens next? I see my uncle and my father behind the door licking their chops. They think it's me because it's all discombobulated like I was after all that happened. Then what happens? It goes down into the cellar and they go in after it and the door slams shut. And then what happens? She says, I don't know, it's real quiet, it's real silent. How long could it be quiet and silent for? It just exploded. Like what? Like an atomic explosion. Then what happens? The fallout comes down, and what happens? It fills up that basement so it can never happen there again. See, these metaphors will reframe the way you see things. It'll change your memory. Now, you won't forget what happened, but it'll reframe the way you hold it. And see, what happened was the anger, which was too scary to feel. I mean, growing up, there's no room for that. It would hurt her even more to be angry. So she had to repress it, and it was repressed still. But now the anger came out in its metaphorical form, and it was safe to feel it, to let it be what it was, and it healed the memory. So these metaphors, your subconscious mind, the uncomfortable feelings that you feel when you turn them into a metaphor, when you find out the internal structure that fuels the feeling, these things can become healing things in the past. It doesn't always have to be traumatic. I had a chiropractor who came to see me, and I'm trying to make a long story short. He says, I like to tell my patients to come in 3 times a week, but I can't. Why? Because I feel like they'll think I'm being greedy and they'll leave. Now, if I said to him, well, it sounds to me like you've got an abandonment issue, does that help him?
No.
Not much. Not at all. In fact, it gives him a complex. Oh, shit, I got an abandonment issue. So I said, what do you feel when you want to tell your patients to come in and you don't? I feel afraid that they'll, like I said, that they won't come back. They'll think I'm greedy. So when you're afraid, where do you feel that? On the inside of your skin or the outside? He said, I feel it right around my stomach. What's it like? Kind of squeezing, like what? 2 hands. Now we've got 2 hands squeezing. That's our metaphor. So what would a metaphor like to do? Would it like to stay there, or could it be interested in going someplace else? He said, well, it could go someplace else. Now, he doesn't know where it's supposed to go, and I don't know where it's supposed to go, but I do know that the 2 squeezing hands want to go somewhere else. Can they begin to go now? So he's looking in his mind's eye, and he says, yeah, I see them going. What direction? Straight? And straight like this, or up? He says, well, they go straight and they go up in the air. And how long do they stay up in the air when they're going straight? For a while. And what happens after a while? They come down, and where do they go? Into a room. What kind of room? A white room. What kind of white room? White tiled room. What kind of white tiled room? Like a hospital room. And when the 2 squeezing hands go to a hospital room with white tile, anything else about that room? He says, yeah, in the corner there's an incubator. What kind of an incubator? The kind that have no holes for mommy and daddy to hold the baby. And he starts sobbing. It's him. Now in the intake, he never told me that. But you see, the subconscious mind remembers everything. Everything. Even if there's a trauma as a fetus, it's encoded in there somewhere. So, would the 2 hands like to go to that baby? Yes. And what do hands know how to do? What do they know what to do? They know how to squeeze. So they go to the baby and they hold it, and they pet it, and they stroke it, and they love it, and they just hug it. How long could it be before mommy and daddy get to the baby? 3 days. And so how long could those hands stay there for? Forever. And can hands stay there forever? Yes. And as hands stay there forever, what's it like around your stomach? Nothing. I don't feel anything. So now use your imagination. Now we're going into imagination. We're creating something. But nothing that we've talked about here is imagination. These are all resident structures that we've given the opportunity to change. But now I said, use your imagination. Imagine you're telling a patient he's got to come in 3 days a week. Do that. Okay, I could do that. Oh, you can? Yeah, I could see that. Now you tell another patient, you're telling her she's got to come in three times a week, and she gives you a funny look like, what are you up to? See that, imagine that. Okay, and he says, oh, I can do that, that's not going to stop me. The squeezing hands are gone. They're back in the memory where they came from in the moment they were born, healing the memory, healing the child. Because for a child, 3 days or however long it was, to not have mommy and daddy hold it when you're coming out, the baby needs to be held, The baby has no protection, has no defense against how awful it would feel, so it disconnects, and now we've got these squeezing hands for years, and now we give it a chance to heal itself. And that's what happens with all of us when we go through a feeling we can't tolerate. And the younger we are, the less boundaries we have. Now you have some kind of boundaries. If I say, do me a favor, go down to Key West and pick me up a key lime pie, say, well, I'm not going down there. You can say no to me. But children don't have that when they're very, very young. They don't have the capacity to keep out stuff. Things come in. So just as you can lose yourself, and by disconnecting, things from the environment can come in. One gentleman says to me, I can't confront other men, I clam up. Well, what happens? He says, well, I want to say something, I get all confused and cloudy. Where in my head? What's it like? I don't know, brown and swirling. Like what? He says, I don't know, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's kind of like crap. So it's like brown crap. So meditate on brown crap and see what you can know about that. And all of a sudden, long story made short, he sees himself at 5 years old. He's in the backyard with his father, and his father says to him, "You've got crap for brains." Kid looks in the corner. He sees the dog duty, and it imports into his head. And now he can't confront any other man because he's got this metaphor of crap in his brain. So he invited it back out, and it's no longer in there. Guess what? You guys walk around with all kinds of things in you. Cyclones and rocks and fires and things that your parents had that got into you. And you have feelings that don't even belong to you, but have been there so long you think they're yours. But then when I work with people and we have these things like a fire, and I say, how long has the fire been there? For as long as I can remember. Who had the fire before you did? Well, I didn't think of that, but I guess my mother. And who had it before that? Her mother. And so this is mom's fire or grandmother's fire. Yeah, you could say that. How do you feel about inviting the fire back to grandma? Okay. Sometimes it's not quite that simple to give it to someone else. I don't want them to have it. Very often I'll hear that. But the point is, once we get the fire out of you, you discover it wasn't your feeling all along. But you thought it was because it was always there. And you accepted it as yours because you always reacted to it. So it's very powerful to get the name of these things that are inside of you. Because they're either something that doesn't belong there, or something that's there because of a break inside your psyche. Because you're dissociated. And by the way, we all do. To one degree or another, we've all dissociated. Few to none of us have gone through life without having a moment where we found something so intolerable we disconnected. But the younger you are, the more easily it can happen because you'll have weaker ego boundaries. One thing that happens when you disconnect is you wind up with a void inside. You find you have an empty space. And that empty space is the result of having lost a part of yourself. And then it becomes difficult to fill that space because you can fill it with drugs or alcohol. Very often makes the space even bigger. You could feed it with gambling or sex or food. And these things will make it bigger too. And so it becomes this insatiable desire to fill up a space that never seems to get filled up. I was working with someone recently, and he said he would seek attention, and the metaphor we got was a void. And I said, tell me about a dark black hole. And a dark black hole, what else do you know about a dark black hole? He says, well, it's kind of cold and muggy. Anything else about when it's cold and muggy? He says, I can't see anything. So what does that tell you? He says, I can't see anything. It means he's in it. So I took a shot. I said, well, when you can't see anything, how long have you been in there? He says, since I was 18. And it turned out, he says, well, how deep is it? He says, 50 feet deep. And I said, so what does an 18-year-old who's that deep want? He says, I want to be accepted and loved. I said, well, how do you feel about telling him that? He said, what do you mean? I said, tell him that you love him. He says, I'll tell him that everything's going to be okay. All right. So he tells him that. The 18-year-old doesn't believe it. Long story made short, when he told himself that he loved himself and the boy received that, all of a sudden it was 25 feet deep. And now there's a light coming in that he can see, and it's helping him to climb out. Now he hasn't climbed out yet, but he's beginning to. And instead of feeling hopeless, now he sees there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So what we're looking at is using more of your whole mind. Instead of just, your left brain is active when you're awake, your right brain is active when you're asleep. In this way, your left brain is actively looking at your right brain and finding those things inside that either don't belong there and need to be removed, or find out what needs to be restored and restored. And the mind will do that. It'll heal itself. I just facilitate it. I don't make it happen. Okay. So the difference between eating a bar of chocolate and reading the directions or reading the ingredients are far. Reading the ingredients to a chocolate bar is quite different than eating it, tasting it. So tonight, all I did was I gave you the ingredients. I told you what it's about. But unless you experience it, it's hard to know what it's like. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a series called Healing the Wounded Child Within. And I'm videotaping it. And so what I'll offer to anyone here, and everyone here, is if you want to work with me for a session at no charge, giving me permission to videotape it, no one will know your name or where it was taped, but I'll have a permission thing to give you. If you want to do a session with me at no charge, specifically on healing the wounded child within, we can do that, and I'll tape it. What you do is you call TA. Everyone here has the number, right? Okay, and my extension is 317. And my name's Richard Siegel. And just call if I'm in session. Just leave a message. I'll get back to you. We'll set something up. If you'd like to try it out. Anyone here that has been through it that want to tell about their experience?
I had an experience with Dr. Siegel. Actually, I went to TA one night and just thought I'd never been to TA at night and didn't know what it was about. Thought I would just kind of breeze through it and come back home, and just get through it. And it was the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life. I was so not prepared for what happened. It happened, but it's been life-changing for me. It was just so vivid. I saw myself. It was just like he explained that I saw myself in a swing under a cedar at our cedar tree at home, and it was just like I was standing on the sidewalk looking at myself. I described what kind of clothes I had on, and the gist of the story was that I had not forgiven myself for some things in my past, and that I had never forgiven myself for being a drug addict or any of the failures that any of the mistakes I had made, and failed marriages and things like that, and just all kind of stuff. And I was able to forgive myself then, and I was able to talk to the young Alita and tell her that I loved her, and that I was sorry that things had went so south so quickly, and that our life hadn't turned out like we had planned when I was a little girl that age. And she forgave me, and so that's all I'm going to tell y'all. It's definitely worth trying, because I'm about one of the most apprehensive people you can. I didn't even think it could work. I was like, no. But it was, I could just, the whole room it just felt like I was right there. I just can't even begin to describe it. I would strongly urge anyone to try it. In fact, I'll be the first one calling to make an appointment, because I have other issues that needs addressing with men in my life. So you can expect a call from me.
Sure.
It was,
Me too.
you have no idea just how that helped me to just, if you recall, I jumped up and while bawling my head off and grabbed you and hugged you because I was just so thankful that you were able to help me with that because it was life-changing. It was so life-changing for me. I can't even begin to tell you enough how much I appreciated it.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share?
So I had been in a group with Dr. Siebel, and it was also during TA. And it was about some abuse I had gone through in my childhood with my father. And at first I was really apprehensive about trying it, because I had been through counseling a lot and all of these things, and I was like, what is this gonna make it any different? But I went with it and I decided to try it. And as I was going through it, it was almost like I had gone back to the situation. And I was healing it from the inside. And I found that it really helped me a lot. And I noticed that over, the next few days or so, I actually started to feel a little bit better. So I thank you for that very much.
Thanks. Yeah.
And any of you guys, if you had any sort of trauma, I absolutely do recommend that you try it.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I'm Winter. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you work with any military
I have.
or vets?
Yeah, I have.
That's a question. Do you have to have trauma as a child, or do you just go back to the inner child to heal the trauma and stuff?
I don't know where we go. The subconscious mind directs me. When you present with an uncomfortable feeling and we get the image for it, the image knows where it came from and what it can do. It may be a child, it may be something that happened a year ago. I don't know. But I trust the subconscious mind because it always knows.
Dr. Siegel, was that some kind of form of hypnotism or?
That's
How does it go
debatable.
about?
I don't see it as hypnotism.
Is it regression?
What it is it's a light naturalistic trance.
Because I felt literally, y'all, I'm not even lying. I literally felt like I was standing on our sidewalk at home. I could almost feel the breeze blowing from the tree, and there I was.
I felt the same way. It's like you're put back.
I could almost
in the
smell the
situation.
smell of that
It's-
Do you
situation.
just start asking questions, or like I don't have any significant trauma, so do you just begin asking questions? Or?
The session always begins with the question, what do you want to have happen?
Okay.
And then with that, I have a series of questions depending on what you say.
What if we don't know what we want to happen?
I didn't know.
Well,
If you recall, I had
Yeah.
no clue. It just happened.
Right.
I'm glad you said that, because see, that would be resistance. And typically in therapy, a therapist would have to wrestle that out. But the way I see it, that's information. So if you said to me, I don't know what I want to have happen, I'd say, well, how can you tell? And you'd say, well, nothing comes to mind. So when nothing comes to mind, whereabouts in the mind does nothing come? The whole mind, the front, the back? Well, it's more towards the back. What's the light towards the back?
I mean, I can only speak for myself. I just know I have this gut feeling that I just want to like get rid of. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so I would go with you there.
Okay.
And
But I don't know what that feeling is.
Well, let's do just a little something, okay?
I don't want to like take your degree or something like that.
Okay. So what I would do is I would ask questions about it, and I'd look for the metaphor. Because when you say I want to get rid of it, I'd want to find out what that's like and what it wants to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Richard is my therapist, and he's one of the main reasons why I stay here. I haven't been through any traumatic experiences as a child, but as an adult, I feel like I have. But as we went back into my inner child, I realized that I have been through things, and there's a reason why I feel the way I feel today and why I am the way I am today. Whether it's significant trauma or not, it works for everybody, I think, in a different way. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You know how sometimes, I know this has happened to me, you'll smell something and it'll bring back a memory. You know that? Okay, that's how it was, but it was like I was standing there and I could smell the cedar tree. A cedar tree puts off a distinctive smell, and I could smell it. It was just like, oh my God. It was just overwhelming emotion. I mean, I remember what clothes I had on. I remember how my hair was fixed. It was just like, I knew what age I was. It was life changing for me. And I waited a long time to be able to be free of that.
See, and another thing is the process is experiential. You're experiencing it. It's not like me giving you an analysis. Well, that means that, and that means that.
Right.
You know, there's little value in me telling you what I think it means.
You didn't have to tell me. I knew.
Right.
I knew.
Right. So we just go with the experience of it, and what the process does is, I don't see it as hypnosis, but it is a light naturalistic trance, and it puts you in the position, as it did with you, of being the observer. You're observing what's happening. So, for example, if you're looking at something going on in your stomach, now you're the observer looking at this thing. Okay. It may be an animal, it may be an energy, whatever it is that you don't want to have. We would look and see what's the metaphor for that. And there's a series of questions that bring us to that. So it always begins with, what do you want? How can you tell? And from there, I ask questions to locate where the feeling is. And the feeling could be inside, or it could even be outside of you. Like that woman who had the electrons, it was all around her. So, any other
It
questions?
was amazing. It was great.
If you have a lot of trauma that you've been through and a lot of abuse and things of that sort, can that interfere with your senses and like your sense of smell or your sense of hearing or anything like in the current?
If I could reach into your brain and take out half of your brain, and reach into your heart and take out half of your heart, you wouldn't function very well. When you go through life and traumatic things happen repeatedly, you lose chunks of yourself. And here you are as an adult, and you don't feel like you're functioning as best as you can. And then you go, well, what's wrong with me? And it feels like you're defective, when in fact all that's happened to you is you've lost parts of you.
Yeah.
And by using the mind, the subconscious, and the metaphors, when you start restoring pieces and you get more and more and more whole, you feel like you can function, and you don't feel like something's wrong or something's missing. And it's very it's very common that we blame ourselves. And that's another feature of a wounded child within. Children always blame themselves. Always, 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 always. Working with a little girl, I think she was 6 or 7, and her father abandoned her when she was 4. And I said to her, I said, by the way, she called him Dave. I said, by the way, whatever happened to Dave? She said, well, we went out to eat, and I didn't want to eat my hamburger, and he left. Children always blame themselves. So if you've got an active child within, you're naturally going to blame you. And that's more fodder for the inner critic, to say you're not good enough, and you never will be, and there's something wrong with you.
Something I'm like afraid of to try this is like if I were to go back into my subconscious, like I'm afraid to like get a flash, you know, and get really triggered with that.
So the first place we go is the fear. How can you tell you're afraid? I can feel it. Where do you feel it? In my chest. What's it like? Like a lightning bolt, for example. So we'd work with the lightning bolt. Maybe the lightning bolt wants to go back in that memory, so you don't have to. See, we want to find an analgesic way, meaning a more comfortable and safer way to heal something. Because the last thing you want to do is go back to that trauma. But you want the trauma to heal. So we use the metaphors to do the work, and you're just the observer. And sometimes it gets to be too much. Sometimes you see something and it's like, I've had enough for today. And that happens. We don't want to re-traumatize your psyche. We don't want to give you more than you can handle, but we want to use the structures to do the healing, because that's why they're there. Let me give you a formula. It's a little hard to follow, but based on everything I've said, maybe you can. An uncomfortable feeling, in its metaphorical form, becomes a healing antibody that goes back in the memory, rescues the child, and finishes the memory. Uncomfortable feelings in their picture form go back, heal, and finish. And then restore. So that child can grow up. Because they're frozen in that moment. And once they're released from there, they can move forward in time.
What if it wasn't, like, what if it wasn't a child? Like, okay, for me, my feeling is disappointment. Mine doesn't even go back as far as the child. For me, I'm a mother who has 3 children. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a wife. And my disappointment that I have caused others all around me is so deeply overwhelming. The disappointment that I've caused to my children and all the people around me is so overwhelming
Yeah.
that it's
Even now talking about it, you choke up. So the guilt is so deep.
it's just the disappointment that if I even close my eyes and see it, it's on their faces.
Yeah. And one of the things you said a moment ago was you said it's so deep. And so I would look.
Choking, like it.
Yeah.
It emotionally, it physically chokes me.
Yeah. I would guess, and it's just a guess. See, when I tell you what I think, it's a guess because we're not doing the process.
Right.
But I would guess the choking is a way of of holding those feelings in and not letting them out, not completely.
It's debilitating though to do that.
Right, exactly. I'm glad you said yes. It's overwhelming, which is why we avoid our feelings, because they're overwhelming. And that's why we'll drink and we'll drug or sex or if we eat or whatever, because we don't know how to deal with that feeling any other way. We don't know how, we can't comfort ourselves any other way.
And that's why, I mean, I even came down here because I couldn't stand to see it on their faces anymore.
Right. Yeah. So what we'd want to do is we'd want to find out where that feeling is, get the structure, and find a way to move it out. Because right now it's getting stuck in your throat. Which may be part of what you're talking about in your gut that you want to have come out, and it's not coming out. So, if I were to say, well, tell me about your family and how it feels, and you'd cry and you'd feel terrible, and maybe you'd leave the office feeling good that you got it out, but next day it would still be there. So we want to get the structure, we want to get the metaphor so it can move out permanently. I mean, a situation where you feel guilt, sometimes, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but sometimes guilt is resentment turned inwards. So for example, and again, I don't know you, but let's say the guilt in this case is resentment turned inward, and we go into the stomach and we find a lightning bolt, for example. And what does a lightning bolt want to do? It wants to zap my kids because they're not accepting me. And it goes to the kids and it zaps them. It doesn't kill them, but it zaps them and it depletes the energy in the electric bolt. And when the electric bolt has discharged its energy, now it comes back as a life force. It's different. And now it empowers you. I'm just making that up. I'm just saying that your feelings, your uncomfortable feelings, in the metaphorical form, can go into the history, wherever it is, even if it's recent, and do something, and it changes the structure. I can't change that lightning bolt, but it changes itself when it does something and releases its energy. So if you want, give me a call, come in, and we'll do a session, and we'll work on that.
Okay.
Stacy, it'll be so worth it.
Yeah. I gotta do something.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're not comfortable doing it here. I'm not asking you to.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you come in, we'll look at that.
Okay.
We'll look at that. I trust the subconscious mind. I never
I
know where.
don't.
All right, then you don't have to. You just have to tell me what you see. That's all you have to do. Just tell me what you see. Not what you want to see. That's the imagination. You just tell me what you do see. Because I've seen the subconscious mind heal over and over and over again. And I don't know how it's going to do it. I just know the questions to facilitate it. Any other questions or anything else?
Can we just make an appointment tomorrow when we come to
We
TA?
are more at you.
Cool. What? Yeah, call me up. Call me because I need to go in my schedule and give you time.
Okay.
What's your thing, 317?
Yep.
Do you have his number? Cause I don't.
No,
It's-
you
it's-
just said it's extension 317, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, so
they're
we have
looking
to
for
call
TA
TA.
and then
I don't
and
have
call
TA.
317.
We'll got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can look it up.
they'll hook you up and then
Yeah.
give me a call. We'll set something up.
Sounds great. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for your
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Harrison.